the good years. "Richard wants you in our room," Gloria said to me the second night after we got back to South Dakota. Things had changed at R23 since we'd been gone. Rich had lived alone with his youngest wife Gloria the whole time, and now they had a baby. They were sharing a home with another family, which now left us with a total of 3 rooms for 12 children and 4 adults. Rich had Molly take half the children in one room with her, the other half with me in another room. Rich and Gloria shared a room with their baby, which meant he had to let Gloria know when he wanted to sleep with one of his other ladies, hence our room. That was hard for her after having him to herself for so long. I first thought was, "Sorry, Gloria, we have as much right to him as you do." I did understand how she felt, though I struggled with the fact that she shared a room with our husband. None of the other ladies had ever got to share a room with Rich full-time. I went to my husband with a different way of thinking than I'd had before my time away from him. I would always be kind and receptive to him when he called for me, but I was done letting his decisions run my emotions. Just as I had decided not to fight with my sister wives anymore to save my own sanity, I now resolved that I would not fight for Rich's attention. I would not seek him out as I had in the past. From now on, he would have to be the one to come to me. He would have to make the effort to win my love. I was going to be a lot more careful about what I said to Rich as well. Before Vegas, I had treated him like my best friend and closest confidant, openly expressing how I felt, whether I was angry or jealous or upset about something one of my sister wives had done. Looking back on it, I realized that it always got me into trouble. It is what got us all sent away. It took me a long time to learn that lesson, but that year in Vegas had matured me. I wouldn't indulge those feelings anymore, but if I did have them, I sure was going to tell him. Still, it was hard to quell the jealousy that reared up in my heart when Rich slept with another wife. It was hard to get past the sense of betrayal. How could a man profess his love for one wife, then happily take another into his bed the next day? I had to remind myself that none of us chose this situation. Rich did not choose his wives, and we did not choose him. All I could do instead was try to appreciate the fact that Rich loved all of his family. Within a month we had moved into the duplex again, having a full apartment for our family, and when Trish and Susan returned to South Dakota a few months after we did, the family was finally whole again. The ladies were so happy to see their children, and the children were delighted to have their mothers back. We all seemed to get along better since our experience in Vegas. We all shared everything, our home, our food, and our children. Rich made a family schedule every week, with the wives taking turns making meals, cleaning the house and tending the children. This equal division of labor had the added benefit of making the children less selfish and more sociable, because they dealt with so many people on a continual basis. As a result, the next few years were the happiest of my married life. "Who wants to help me feed the cows?" Rich asked the children after breakfast. He was an extremely kind and loving father, and made an effort to do things with them whenever he could. "I do," the children said in unison. "Hurry and help do the breakfast dishes, then you can come with me." The children rushed around clearing off the tables, wiping down high chairs, and sweeping floors, while Rich hooked the trailer to the four-wheeler. When the children finished their chores, they ran outside to join their father. Rich had made benches for the trailer for them to sit on. I was pregnant again, so I stayed behind to look after Rich and Gloria's baby, Shirley, so that Gloria could go along to help tend the children. After Rich had finished the animal chores with the children, he brought Martha down to my room for her nap. He lay on my bed next to her, and asked her to sing a song to him. She launched into the hymn Angry Words, but she didn't know all the words as from the tongue unbridled slip is a mouthful for a toddler, and her effort to sing the song was the cutest thing ever. "Come here, Mother Rachel," Rich said, patting the bed next to them. I went over and sat down. Rich took Martha's little hand and placed it on my growing tummy. "Do you feel that, Martha? Mother is going to have a new little baby." Martha laughed in delight as the baby's foot kicked her little hand. Barbie, who had been lying on her own bed, came over to feel it too. The girls could not wait to meet their new sibling. I spent the last few months of 2007 getting bigger and composing music for everyone to sing on Rich's birthday in January. It had been a hit with Rich last year, and this year we would be in the same place with Rich, so we could sing it to him in person. The sister wives had agreed to make all the girl children matching green dresses for the birthday program, and we shared the sewing workload among us. Susan taught school for all of the older children in a small shed outside our house. I taught preschool and kindergarten. During recess, I gathered all the children together to rehearse our birthday songs. I think the children enjoyed this special time we shared as much as I did. Father was kinder that year as well. Maybe being locked up in the Purgatory Correctional Facility, 30 miles northwest of Short Creek in southern Utah, had chastened him or softened his heart. Father still sent the people messages from prison, passed along through phone calls or letters, and the people still followed his word. He sent several messages from my handmaid Rachel, asking for my forgiveness again. Other times, he sent stern messages of correction, but he was generally less strict than he had been. He may have been somewhat distracted by the preparations for his trial on charges of rape as an accomplice, which began on September 10, 2007. The star witness was Alyssa Wall, who had been married at the age of 14 to Alan Steed. Steed was her first cousin, and 19 years old at the time. Father had performed the wedding at the same motel in Caliant where I was married. Making a perfect snapshot of what living in the church was like, Alan Steed testified in Father's defense. When Steed was asked by the prosecutor, "If you were told by the prophet to disobey the laws of manna, would you do it?" he said, "I would." Steed was later charged with felony rape, but a plea deal resulted in a lesser charge of solemnizing a prohibited marriage and just a month in jail. Father was convicted on both counts, and 2 months later the judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive sentences of 5 years to life in prison. He still faced charges in Arizona as well as federal charges of unlawful flight. Being a convicted felon did nothing to lessen Father's position as leader of the church. In fact, he was still controlling every aspect of the people's lives. In January, he sent a message that he wanted me to go to the land of refuge in Texas to stay with his family while I waited to have my baby, since there was a midwife there. I was due February 29, although I had already decided I was giving birth on Leap Day, because I wanted my child to have a real birthday. Rich drove me down and returned to the family in the Black Hills of South Dakota, but I didn't mind that he had to go back. I was so happy to see my brothers and sisters again. I hadn't seen them since the summer of 2005. There had been a lot of construction since the last time I was there, with many new homes, and the new temple was now finished. At night, I lay on my sister Angela's bed with her while she told me what had been happening during the last couple of years, since I had not been allowed any contact with them. Father had ordered that there be no communication between the different lands of refuge, since everything at all times was a secret. You could only know what happened on any particular land of refuge if you lived there, which is why I had got in trouble for telling my little sister that we had cows in South Dakota. Angela and I stayed up all night. She told me that before Father was caught by the authorities, he had married off our sister Teresa the day after she turned 15 to Angela's husband, Raymond Jessup, who was also married to my sister Marianne, as well as 2 of my cousins, 2 of my aunts, and 2 Musa girls, Mary and Marie. So Teresa had to negotiate life as a plural wife raised 9th at such a young age. At first I was surprised, since Father had allowed his other daughters to wait until they were 18, or at least very close to 18, but it made more sense when I remembered those little girls Father had married himself. Then, 3 months after Father was arrested, he had Raymond Jessup sent away from his family, which meant my sisters had no husband, so Father had all 3 move back in with his family. Angela had to have her baby without her husband, and the stress of that caused complications during the birth at home. She ended up having a C-section in the hospital to save her life, and the babies. "I'm really sad that all this happened to you," I said, "but I'm glad I get to spend some time with you now." We both told stories of our sister wife's struggles, and Angela told me how hard her married life had been. Like me, she had been on the receiving end of her sister wives' jealousy because they thought their husband, Ray, loved her the most. Despite how hard it was to hear certain things, it was also fun and comforting to be able to pour my heart out to Angela and share the thoughts and feelings I kept hidden deep within me all this time. The next few weeks were happy ones for me. I spent lots of time with my other sisters, and gossiped and laughed late into the night. Mother Annette came into our room one night, acting like she was sleepwalking. She held her hands out in front of her, and walked in an unstable, crazy manner, just to make the girls scream, and she laughed and said, "You girls go to bed." One day I was taking a walk with Angela when we ran into Tina Steed, an old friend of mine, on a dirt road. Tina showed off her two beautiful children, a boy around 2 years old and a baby daughter. She told me that when her son was just a few weeks old, father had told her she was unworthy and made her leave the lands of refuge to repent, leaving her baby behind. How could he separate a tiny, helpless baby from his mother like that? Father had let her return after her son was a year old. All of father's family took time out of their days to come see me. I had missed them all so much. I spent most of my time sewing with Teresa and Josie. Josie had kept most of mother's belongings, so we went through it all together. Josie wanted me to take a lot of it, but the memory of mother was still hard on me because of all that she'd gone through with her illness and being separated from her children. It hurt too much to think about it, so I didn't want to take anything that would remind me. Even though Teresa was married, once she went back to live in father's house, everyone treated her like a child. She wasn't allowed to make her own choices or be responsible for herself. Both she and Angela still loved Ray, and they missed him. Ariane missed him some, but had a lot of struggles with jealousy and didn't know if she wanted to go back to him. In fact, her struggle with jealousy over Ray's spending time with his other wives was the reason father had sent him away. It was all a big mess. I got to spend time with my brothers during their mealtimes too. They were required to eat downstairs, away from father's wives and daughters, so that they would not be tempted to look at or like the girls. The boys shared bedrooms down one hall, and the girls down another, and each group was prohibited from entering the other's area. Married sisters were allowed to talk to the brothers, as long as we didn't get caught doing it too often. Rich came down to Texas to be with me a week before my due date, bringing my 2 little girls with him. Father's family was so happy to see them, and everyone was intent on spoiling them every chance they got. I was glad to have my husband and daughters with me. I had asked the midwife if there was any way to induce labor before February 29. She gave me Cytodic and several other drugs, but nothing worked. And then, wouldn't you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning on leap day, I had my first contraction. God was reminding me that he was in charge, not me. "I guess what I want doesn't really matter because we're having a leap baby," I said to Rich. I figured that if this baby was like the first 2, it wouldn't come out until I was almost dead from pushing. In the end, the labor was a little easier than it had been with Martha. But even so, I was very glad when it was all over. I knew baby son weighed 8.5 pounds, and he was perfect. Father had sent a message with instructions what to name the baby. I had really hoped I'd be able to name this child, especially since father was in prison, but Rich was as loyal to father as ever. Rulon it was. All of father's large family wanted to meet the new baby. There had been some bad viruses going around that winter, so the midwife did her darndest to keep the sick children away from the baby, but with so many people and little ones coming and going, she wasn't entirely successful. Rich wanted us to head back to South Dakota a few days after the birth. Before we left, I went looking for my sister Angela in her room. "I'm going to keep your phone number just in case I need it," I told her. "And you keep mine just in case you need it." It was a direct violation of father's orders, but I think we'd both been through enough at father's hands, being separated from our families, that we were willing to risk it. "Okay, let's," Angela said. "But we can't let anyone know. At least text me some okay if I dare." We were back home for less than a week when baby Rulon developed pneumonia. A nurse on the land had some medical supplies, including an oximeter to measure the baby's blood oxygen levels, which hovered in the mid to upper 70s as he struggled to breathe. The nurse kept him on oxygen in an effort to raise the saturation closer to 100, where it should be. She also managed to get her hands on ceftriaxone, an antibiotic, which she injected into his leg. It was wrenching to see my newborn suffer so. As the days passed, his condition deteriorated, and his weight dropped. "Please, can we take him to the hospital?" I asked Rich several times. "He needs a doctor." "Rachel, you know that we have been instructed to give the children a blessing and do all we can at home. Let's keep working with him here." The antibiotic didn't seem to be helping, which made me think it may have expired. The nurse agreed, and stopped giving him the injections. I would have to rely on my own knowledge of natural healing to help him. I breastfed him as much as possible, kept him near a humidifier at all times, placed warm onion packs on his chest, and gave him drops of garlic oil. Over the next 2 weeks, baby Rulon slowly improved. My spirits soared when I knew that my son would be okay. And then on the evening of April 3, I heard the family phone beep as I was walking through the living room. It was a text from my brother Ammon. I nearly dropped the phone when I saw the photos he'd sent. I wrapped Rulon in a warm blanket and ran to the watchtower to find Rich.